Not every Marvel villain can be as powerful as Thanos or as entertaining as Killmonger. These baddies didn't live up to the hype they generated, even the ones that didn't generate much hype at all. In 2022, Marvel fans finally got to see the real Mandarin, the iconic Chinese villain from the comics who was a persistent adversary of Iron Man. Played by Tony Leung, the Mandarin appeared in The Legend of the Ten Rings, but a decade earlier, the third Iron Man film completely wasted the villain. Rather than being the wielder of 10 mystical rings that grant him supernatural, almost godlike powers, the Mandarin in Iron Man 3 is portrayed as the leader of a Middle Eastern terrorist organization. Played by Ben Kingsley, it seemed like it had the potential to be an interesting take on the character, but it was all undermined by one of the worst twists in the Marvel cinematic history.
Look around you, costumes, green screen. Honestly, I wasn't on location for half of this stuff. When I was, it was movie magic love.
Kingsley's version of the Mandarin turns out to be little more than a patsy. He's a British actor named Trevor Slattery who's been hired by Aldrich Killian to be the face of his criminal empire. Despite the negative reaction, Marvel brought Slattery back for Shang-Chi, and he's slated to appear heavily in the Wonder Man series on Disney+. Adam Warlock is an important character on the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. First introduced as a hero of an alternate Earth, Warlock went on to play a central role in multiple Infinity storylines. Nowhere to be seen in the MCU when the Infinity Gauntlet was adapted for the big screen, his eventual arrival was teased in the final moments of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Unfortunately, due to a series of poorly aged tweets, director James Gunn was fired and ultimately rehired, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was delayed by years. That only made people more excited for Adam Warlock's debut, especially when it was announced that actor Will Poulter was cast to play him. On screen, however, the cosmic hero is nothing like his counterpart on the page, at least not the version people really wanted to see.
I am the Warlock, Mum, and I am done with being ordered around!
Where fans wanted the foreboding, aloof, and ominous interstellar hero, what they got is an overpowered, clumsy goofball, as the character is reimagined as an artificial man with the mind of a child. It certainly works for the tone of the movie, which ping-pongs between light-hearted romp and tear-jerking send-off, but as an adaptation of the character, it's sorely lacking. Stephen Strange has only a few major villains in the comics, and two of them get serious play in 2016's Doctor Strange. Although Dormammu is saved for the film's finale, classic villain Baron Karl Mordo is a supporting character, and surprisingly, a friend rather than a foe. That all changes in the film's post-credit stinger, where it's revealed that Mordo is seeking to destroy magic users following the rise of Doctor Strange, setting him up for a major role as the antagonist in the sequel.
Power has a purpose.
Fast forward to 2021, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness arrives, and Mordo is nowhere to be found. To be fair, Mordo does technically make an appearance, played once again by Chiwetel Ejiofor, just not the same version of him. Ejiofor plays the Earth 838 variant of Mordo, who's also the Sorcerer Supreme, putting in a solid performance while also completely ignoring all the major developments from Strange's first film. Even though this Mordo is a member of the Illuminati alongside Professor X, Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, and Captains Carter and Marvel, the fact that he doesn't try to start a magical apocalypse like his comic book counterpart was a bit disappointing to fans of the comics. Another second-string villain from the Iron Man comics, M.O.D.O.K is one of Marvel's strangest creations, a giant floating head with little arms and legs. The mental organism designed only for killing totally works in his own comedic stop-motion animated series, but he's hardly the kind of weird character one would expect to see in the MCU. That is, until the MCU went into the quantum realm, where weirdness reigns in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. For the MCU, M.O.D.O.K was imagined a bit differently. Instead of a brilliant scientist working for AIM, he's Darren Cross, the villainous Yellow Jacket from the first Ant-Man film, whose physical form is warped by his journey to the quantum realm. While comic book M.O.D.O.K is a master tactician who's defeated some of Marvel's most powerful heroes, he was little more than a punchline in Quantumania, and not a very funny one.
I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Just now noticing the baby legs.
They're not baby legs.
A little bit like a Bjorn.
To make matters worse, the effects used to bring M.O.D.O.K to life are wonky at best and feel like something out of a Spy Kids movie at worst. Maybe someday the character will be reintroduced more effectively, but right now we're forced to wonder if it had been better served on the cutting room floor. As a villain who can mimic the fighting style of an enemy combatant, Taskmaster is a frightening adversary of the Avengers. He carries a shield like Captain America and a bow and arrow like Hawkeye. He can swing like Spider-Man, fight like Daredevil, and has expert marksmanship skills like Bullseye. Suffice to say, he's one of the most lethal villains in the Marvel Universe who's not a superhuman or mutant. That's why audiences are right to be excited when Taskmaster was announced as a major antagonist in Black Widow, after being ignored for some 15 years in the MCU. Played by Olga Kurylenko, the MCU's Taskmaster is gender-swapped, but otherwise accurate in terms of the character's abilities. She can copy Black Widow's moves and is shown studying the likes of Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Captain America to learn their techniques. Even her costume is a pretty good translation. She wields a shield, a bow, and a sword, just like her comic book counterpart. So what's the problem? Like another character on this list, the normally chatty mercenary is rendered silent in the script, barely speaking a word and serving as a glorified henchman to the actual main villain, Dreykov. Taskmaster is due to return in Thunderbolts, but considering how little she's known in the trailers, it seems that Marvel may be making her the equivalent of Slipknot in their version of DC's The Suicide Squad. Daredevil is Marvel's top street-level hero, but you might be surprised to learn that he doesn't have many well-known villains in his rogues gallery. That's why it was a curious decision to burn all three of his biggest baddies in his big-screen debut, with Kingpin, Elektra, and Bullseye all playing major roles in the 2003 film. It's Bullseye who gets the short straw. Played admirably by Colin Farrell, he's reimagined as an Irish punk with a Matrix-style leather jacket and a scar shaped like a bullseye on his forehead. Despite Daredevil wearing a relatively comic-faithful bright red leather costume, Bullseye looks more like he walked out of a back alley fistfight in Dublin. With so many options for a character with expert marksmanship skills, it's a curious decision to portray him as borderline clownish.
Was that really necessary?
Necessary? No. It was fun.
A decade later, Bullseye was rebooted for season 3 of Netflix's Daredevil, where he was played by Wilson Bethel, but he was sadly disappointing there as well. Rather than show Bullseye at his best, we don't see him for long, until he's driven insane and starts wearing Daredevil's costume. Bullseye has yet to appear on screen in his classic outfit, but he does wear Daredevil's. Marvel may have missed the bullseye with Bullseye, but neither version of that character was botched quite as badly as Dark Phoenix. In the comics, the Dark Phoenix, a twisted form of the hero Jean Grey, is the result of a cosmic force, with her story largely taking place away from Earth. She's among the most powerful X-Men villains, and was showcased in one of the comic's most iconic storylines. Unfortunately, X-Men The Last Stand defangs the entire story, portraying Dark Phoenix as a brainwashed Jean Grey with sounded-up psychic powers, and making her a glorified henchman of Magneto.
Professor can help. He can fix it. I don't want to fix it.
A disappointing interpretation, Famke Janssen's turn as Dark Phoenix in 2006 might as well have been an entirely different character. After all, there's no mention of cosmic anything, the result of Fox's more grounded approach to the X-Men in the 2000s. By 2019, though, superhero movies like Guardians of the Galaxy were featuring interstellar adventures that audiences ate up like candy. That's why it was truly head-scratching that Fox's second attempt at the story, X-Men Dark Phoenix, was arguably an even bigger flop. Set mostly on Earth and only hinting at the cosmic nature of Jean Grey's new powers, Sophie Turner's version of the character was a squandered second chance. Batroc the Leaper admittedly isn't the biggest Marvel villain, or even an especially memorable one, unless you're a serious fan of Captain America from the comics. He's a somewhat goofier character in his early appearances, and he did little more than kick a lot. That said, the character got some attention in the MCU when real-life mixed martial artist and UFC champion Georges St. Pierre played him in 2014's Captain America the Winter Soldier. You won't find a more perfect casting choice, as St. Pierre is both French and a master of martial arts. He even shares his first name with the villain. Unfortunately, his lone showdown is more of a letdown, as Cap trounces the French mercenary with just a few quick moves. It's a solid fight sequence, but the fact that it's goodbye to Batroc in the movie feels like going to a big-name boxing bout that ends in a first-round knockout. St. Pierre got a second chance in 2021's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but once again, his character felt sorely underutilized.
Voila.
When it comes to Marvel's Netflix shows, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, there are quite a few overhyped villains to point to, but few of them overpromised and underdelivered like The Hand. In the comics, The Hand are 616's premier group of ninjas, appearing in Daredevil comics and playing a prominent role in Wolverine stories. Then came Defenders, billed as an Avengers-like team-up of Marvel's TV heroes. The 8-part miniseries pits a combined might of the 4 Netflix heroes against The Hand, who have diabolical plans for New York City. The only problem is, the Defenders Avengers paints the Hand as a mostly incompetent band of thugs that have more in common with Shredder's bumbling Foot Clan from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles than the highly skilled, battle-hardened ninjas from the comics. After all, their leader's big plan is apparently to collapse New York City over the skeleton of an ancient dragon.
It's just a city. You'll get used to watching them fall.
Sorry, Alexandra Reed, but when it comes to using giant mythical creatures to destroy Manhattan, Ozymandias did it better. Following Avengers Endgame, fans were anticipating the MCU's next big bad, and Kang was an obvious choice for many fans. In the comics, a time-traveling Kang has been a thorn in the side of the Avengers since the 60s. With many variants of Kang throughout Marvel history, he seemed like fertile ground for an MCU saga that could culminate in a massive two-part Avengers event. Fans got their wish when rising star Jonathan Majors was cast as Kang, but when he finally appeared, he wasn't what they were expecting. His first appearance was as a quirky oddball called He Who Remains in Season 1 of Loki, while his ultimate reveal as the monstrous Kang the Conqueror came in one of the MCU's most disappointing entries, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. In that film, Kang is far from the imposing multiverse-conquering tyrant he is in the comics, and instead comes across as a bargain version of better villains, easily bested by the tiny heroes.
Today, we conquer eternity and the dynasty of kings.
Of course, Avengers 5 didn't end up being the Kang dynasty. Due to Major's legal woes, Marvel was forced to pivot their grand plans in the direction of Victor Von Doom. If there's anything that frustrates fans of Fox's X-Men movies, it's how the series kept featuring Magneto as its main antagonist, rarely exploring the rest of the team's incredible array of iconic villains. Fans begged for powerhouses like Mr. Sinister, while major characters like Juggernaut were relegated to glorified cameos. After a decade of being ignored, the ancient evil called Apocalypse showed up in 2016's X-Men Apocalypse, and he was met with groans before the movie was even released. He's played by Oscar Isaac, but few people blame the actor under the mask. In the comics, Apocalypse is supposed to be as cosmically terrifying as Thanos or Kang, but that's not felt in the movie. Isaac's 5'" stature is rarely altered to make him seem physically imposing, while his makeup gives him the look of a glorified Power Rangers villain. Thankfully, Marvel wasn't afraid to bring the Golden Globe winner back into the multiverse, casting Isaac as Moon Knight in the critically acclaimed Disney Plus series of the same name.
From the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one!
Nobody is ever going to argue that Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool, as featured in his 3 films since 2016, has been anything short of uncanny in its accuracy to the source material. His costume is lifted right off the page, while Reynolds' performance is a pitch-perfect recreation of the Merc with a mouth that comic book fans had come to love. The same can't be said, of course, for the character's debut in 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine. Reynolds reluctantly agreed to star as Wade Wilson despite not being happy with the character's portrayal in the script. He was right to have concerns, as fans were outraged to find that everything they loved about the character was wrong. He had no costume, he had giant blades in his forearms and shot lasers out of his eyes, and worst of all, his mouth was fused shut. Fans have been waiting years to see Deadpool on screen, but even Reynolds knows that first attempt was a total disaster.
Why don't you do us all a favor and shut the up? Or I'll sew your pretty mouth shut.
Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Often in comic book movies, more outlandish characters are given more grounded interpretations. So when Tim Story set out to adapt the Fantastic Four into a big-budget franchise, certain elements had to be changed. Dr. Doom, for example, was given a long, fancy trench coat instead of a flowing cape. But what do you do when your villain is a giant alien in purple robot armor who eats planets for breakfast? Well, the obvious answer is you make him a cloud, and that's exactly what happened in 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. For fans, the reality that the Fantastic Four's most powerful foe, Galactus, wasn't at all faithful to the comics was absolutely infuriating. Comic readers have been dreaming of seeing the giant purple planet eater for decades, so the reveal that he was nothing more than evil gas was a massive disappointment. Thankfully, Marvel is finally correcting their mistake with the Fantastic Four: First Steps, which promises to show Galactus in all his giant glory. Sam Raimi's first 2 Spider-Man films are the gold standard of comic book movies, and they set a new bar for just how good they could be. Major moneymakers that also happened to be critically acclaimed, they featured 2 of Spidey's most famous foes, the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. But one popular villain was saved for the threequel, the alien symbiote known as Venom. The only problem was, he had very little in common with the character from the comics, largely due to his casting. In the comics, Venom's human identity is Eddie Brock, a physically intimidating, tough-talking bodybuilder and journalist who the aliens symbiote sees as a worthy host due to both his size and vicious personality. So, who's the best actor to embody the qualities of this oversized, violent meathead? Of course, you'd choose Topher Grace, 5'11" and slight of build, who'd recently ended a run as a teenager on that 70s show. Grace isn't an imposing figure, and hardly the right actor to play a tough jock, so the character written for him was a whiny, petulant man-child who isn't very tough at all, the polar opposite of Brock from the comics.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
Raimi himself admitted that he didn't quite understand the character, saying, "I didn't recognize enough humanity within that character to be able to identify with him properly." That's really what it boils down to.